Hi, my name is Matt Kapanis. I'm a yoga teacher here in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm sitting here with my friend John Leslie Lange, who just finished his first book, Seven Malas, A Love Story, and it's published under Arjuna Press. Just recently came out, so I'm going to ask John a few questions about it and get his take on the whole process of writing and the themes covered in the book, and sit back and enjoy. So, John, I'm curious, first, where did you get the idea for Seven Malas, A Love Story?
Well, Matt, first, before we even go into the questions, just let me say, Matt is not just a yoga teacher. Matt is an extraordinary yoga teacher, and one of the very first yoga teachers who I ever studied under. And as a matter of fact, he's been just about my favorite yoga teacher for probably since 2009?
It's
so
been
9 years.
It's been a long road, yeah.
So thank you very much, Matt, for being here.
Thanks, John.
And thanks for sharing this journey, because you've been there from the very beginning.
Thank you.
Anyway, where did I get the idea for Seven Malas, A Love Story? Well, I had written a book of poetry, and the poetry basically came out of my own experiences. I've always loved the poetry of Rumi and Hafiz, and I ended up with this book of about 60 poems. And I looked at that and said, well, what can I do with this? Nobody buys books of poetry. So maybe what I could do is I could disguise the poetry as a novel. And that's exactly what I did. Seven Malas is really a book of poetry disguised as a novel.
Nice. Well, tell me about the themes in the book.
Well, the themes in the book are very much about one man's search for love and meaning in his life. And over the course of 12 years, which is the time frame of the book, he encounters a series of teachers, all female incarnations of the goddess Shakti, who basically interact with him, and through their relationships, he learns a series of lessons about love. And one of the most important lessons that he learns is that he realizes that his purpose in life is to seek, create, and enjoy beauty. His svadharma, his raison d'être, if you will, in French. And that becomes the ongoing motivation and theme of his life from that point forward.
So why malas? Is there some sort of kind of theme or metaphor embodied in the idea of a mala?
Absolutely. A mala, just for those of you who don't know, is one of these beautiful things. It's 108 beads. It's a Buddhist or Hindu rosary. And it becomes used as a metaphor in a number of different ways in the book. The first and most obvious metaphor is the book itself. The book is a series of poems that are linked together with prose, like beads on a mala. So that's the first usage. The second usage happens in the course of the book, where he discovers that a great way to process a breakup or come to terms with the ending of a relationship is to memorialize that relationship by creating a mala. And as he knots together the beads of the mala, he meditates on what went right, what went wrong in that relationship, and he chooses the beads to symbolize something about the woman, something about the relationship, something about the energy that was present in that relationship. So that's the second usage of the metaphor of a mala. And the third metaphor, I'm not going to do a spoiler here, so you're going to have to read the book to find out what that is, but that's perhaps the most important metaphorical use of the term mala in the book.
Okay, well that sounds juicy. Hey, I'm curious, what are your hopes for this book, Seven Malas?
Well, of course, I'd love to sell 1 million copies, maybe 2 million.
Hey.
I would love to have commercial success, of course. The greatest thing about creating something is seeing the reaction that other people have to it. That is the greatest feedback that I can get. So, of course, the more that happens, the better I feel about the book. The obvious endpoint for me, having designed this book the way it is, with 7 sort of equal stories, I see it ultimately as becoming a 7-part miniseries on Netflix or Amazon, something like that. Maybe even a series of movies.
Okay, so you see a certain adaptability to the screen.
Absolutely. In my mind, but then again, the world is filled with possibility at this point.
Right.
Reality has yet to set in.
Okay. I'm curious, how much of the book is autobiographical?
interestingly enough, obviously the poems came out of my own experience. And if you view them as kind of roots to the story, absolutely that came out of moments of pain or love or longing or something that happened to me. Once I started to link them together into the mala of the book, 7 malas, what became clear to me is that the further I allowed my characters to stray from my own experience, to forge their own paths, if you will, the better the writing became. So 7 malas is definitely a work of fiction. Certainly there are experiences and little bits and pieces of people that I used as templates for some of my characters, but definitely it's like any good writing, it's not autobiographical, it's a work of fiction.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I'm curious, how do you find inspiration to write?
Well, I've never lacked for inspiration. When I had my day job, I did plenty of writing as a hopeful wannabe. I've written 2 novels, 5 screenplays, and a book of poetry, mostly in my spare time. Now that I have more time, and I'm no longer working at a day job, I anticipate that I am going to be doing a lot more writing. And so I actually have a number of projects in the works, and we'll see. My stories include a whole different bunch of genres. I have science fiction, thrillers, comedies, and then 7 malas, which is kind of a genre buster since it's sort of part prose, part poetry. But I've got another 6 stories right now inside my head screaming to get out.
So nice.
So that will happen.
Okay. I thought this was actually your first book. Is it the first one published?
That is exactly right.
Okay.
In terms of publishing, self-publishing is the way many authors go these days.
Yes.
Because, well, there's a host of different reasons. That's probably the subject of a different interview. But for me, it was all about the fact that I'm 65. I want to have 6 books out by the time I'm 70. That is a stated goal, and I'm going to do it.
Okay.
I have my book of poetry coming out in the next 6 months, which many of the poems are from 7 malas. But I have had 3 screenplays read by Paramount Pictures, and they liked my writing style and didn't unfortunately buy anything. But,
Okay.
But I started off as a novelist, veered off into screenwriting, and now I'm back to writing novels and poetry. And who knows, there might be a screenplay in my future here in the next 12 months.
Okay, so what are you currently working on?
Well, right now, I'm on the very steep learning curve of marketing.
Okay.
I'm learning about how to market a book. And I have a very good friend who is a novelist, an established novelist for 40 years, who's written over 20 novels, very well known. And he told me, he said, John, one of the reasons you might want to consider self-publishing is that even if you were part of one of the big 4 or 5, publishing houses, you have to do a lot of the marketing yourself. You have to create your own following. You have to create a demand for your product. They're typically not going to do that for you. So I'm learning all about the harsh lessons of marketing, and frankly, it's a completely different set of skills than anything in terms of creating a story. So I'm learning a lot, but I think it'll work out.
Okay. What would be advice for aspiring young writers or older writers or any aspiring writers?
Any writer, there's different types of people who want to be a writer. Bottom line is, a writer writes. If you want to be a writer, then write something. Sit down, do something, write it. Don't talk about it. Don't tell other people about it until, you can tell people that, but the most important thing is to actually get something down on paper, because nothing exists until it's here, until you can print it out. And that's when something actually exists. We all are Shakespeare in our heads. We've all got brilliant ideas. What happens between here and putting it on the paper is a translation of something that is Shakespeare to something that is less than Shakespeare.
Yeah.
The only way to make it less than Shakespeare consistently is to practice. Become a writer, someone who writes consistently, write often, write a lot, and you will find that the diminishment of your Shakespeare lessens the more you do it. It's just like It's like running. It's like training for a marathon. You don't go out and, run a 3-hour marathon your very first try.
Yeah.
You need to train.
Right.
And so you've got to train those muscles. So a writer writes.
Okay.
Bottom line.
Got to keep the wheels greased. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, so I'm curious, how do you deal with writer's block?
What the heck is writer's block? I've never had a problem
Okay.
with writer's block. My problem has always been, sitting down and actually doing something.
And reining it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually getting something done.
Okay.
I love to write. Writing for me is not a chore. It's something that even when I'm not inspired and I sit down, if I have some kind of idea of where I'm going, something will come out of that. It might be something that is a starting point that needs a lot of reworking, or it might be Mozart. It might be like just dictated by the gods, and there it is, perfect. Boom. That's happened lots of times.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
You just. I don't get writer's block. So
nice. Sounds like you're right in the zone where you need to be. What's the best thing about being a writer?
Well, the best thing about being a writer is really that you can write anywhere. You can write on anything. If you have a broken pencil and you have a piece of scrap of paper, you can start something, and you never know where it's going to go. My very first novel, which was my very first lengthy work, I started on one of the very first laptops ever created. It was an old compact, something or other, weighed about 10 pounds or whatever, but I was out in the middle of a forest and I wrote these 2 pages. And what I realized after I sat back and looked at these 2 pages was, there's a scene here with a character and all the rest of that. I am curious to know what came before this, how they got to this place in this story, and where they're going from here. And so there you go. You sit down, you write a page, you write 2 pages, and boom, you now have a slice of a story, and you can fill out the backstory, and you can take it forward in time to the culmination or conclusion of that story, and it's really great. So the great thing about being a writer is it starts in your head. You can do it anywhere, and you don't need anything more than ideas and time.
Well, awesome. That's fantastic advice. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Well, this has been illuminating for me personally, and I'm happy that you honored me to sit down and kind of share a little bit of the journey, the writer's journey with you. Yeah.
Thank you, man.
I wish you great luck on selling those 1 million copies. And it's out there. You can find it, I'm sure, in various online sources. The book is called 7 Malas, A Love Story by John Leslie Lange. John, thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure, and I'll see you in yoga class.
Indeed.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.